Hello and welcome. Welcome to our first in a series of webinars using the MTSS framework in your virtual school counseling program. Welcome, we're glad you're here with us. Our contact information is here. We have ways to follow us and connect for more resources on Twitter, on Facebook. And if you'd like a copy of this PowerPoint, please text MTSS to this phone number that you have here. And we're going to go ahead and jump in next with introductions. So hello, my name is Dr. Emily Goodman-Scott. I'm so fortunate to be working with a group of other counselor educators, school counselor educators, including Dr. Jake Olsen, myself, Dr. Peg Donahue, and Dr. Jennifer Bettersby-Bond. So the four of us have been working together for a number of years. We were all practicing school counselors, as well as very integral in our schools, PBIS or MTSS implementation in our schools. And we really saw the beauty of how MTSS can align so well with the school counseling program to really better the work that we did as school counselors. So we have a series of webinars that's coming, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the four of us as a group, we've written this book along with a group of other scholars on aligning your comprehensive school counseling program with MTSS. This is the only book out there that aligns K through 12, all tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3, from K through 12. So we're really excited about that book that came out last year. And we collectively call ourselves school counselors for MTSS. So feel free, follow us on Twitter, Facebook. We have resources, a lot of free stuff. And for this, we're doing a series of webinars. And for today, this is led by Dr. Jake Olsen and myself. And for more information, please reach out to Dr. Jake Olsen, as his info was on that first slide. So welcome, we're glad you're here with us. The goal for today is to give you a quick bit of about 15 minutes for this webinar to give you a chunk of some basic resources. All right, and really what we're looking at, although we've talked a good bit in the past about MTSS and school counseling, the thought for today is how does that framework, how does that alignment, how does that transfer to virtual school counseling as we are in this age today of a COVID-19 world and trying to transfer the services we provide to our students and our families and our schools and our staff into this virtual setting. So that's really the point of our conversation today and the series in general, as you'll see on the next slide. So this is the first of about 4 webinars. We'll be posting one a week. Right now, this is mid-April. And we'll be posting one a week for the next 4 weeks, and those will be on our website. They're free, they're available. Please use those. And again, our website is here, School Counselors for MTSS. And feel free to share them. We hope that they're helpful. So again, this is the first week and the first webinar, and more will be coming. So first, to start you out on what is MTSS, this will be just like a small nugget for you. So looking at the next slide, what is MTSS? So as we know, it's an overarching framework that looks at both prevention and intervention. What are we doing for our students? And it's looking at the whole student, so academics and behaviors. We previously have considered that PBIS and RTI, but MTSS is really this overarching framework of both, serving the entire student. And as you'll see in the next slide, when we look at that in comparison to school counseling, we think about what are we doing to support all of our students at the tier 1? What are we doing for some of our students at the tier 2? And the red at the top is what are we doing for few students? So rather than having these brand new services, it's how are we looking at the ASCA model or other comprehensive school counseling programs, and how are we putting them into those 3 tiers? As you'll see in the next slide here, we made a graphic. And this is a free download that you can find, again, if you go to our website, and that's available for you to download at any time. But so we looked at the ASCA national model and we put it into those 3 tiers. So things like classroom lessons, school-wide initiatives, academic and career plans are things we're doing for all students at the tier 1. Tier 2 includes things like consultation, collaboration, small group counseling, individual counseling, and so forth. And then at that tier 3 level, what we're already doing as school counselors is we're doing a lot of wraparound services and working as part of a team to ensure students are getting the supports that they need for those students who have the most critical needs in our schools. So that in a nutshell, in addition to this other slide, when we look at what is MTSS, where we look at it's this overarching system where we have systems, data, and practices, these 3 triangles. And we look at these 3 pieces together, systems, data, practices individually, and how they overlap to look at this MTSS really in this big picture systems focus, looking at outcomes. So that's, again, that's your like 30 to 60-second overview of what is MTSS. So how does this work for us today in our COVID-19 world that we're responding to? So implications for virtual school counseling. So as you'll see in this next slide, looking at this image, systems, data, and practices. What's important to think about for us as school counselors is what's already in place. What are you already doing rather than reinventing? I know as we were transitioning, we're still transitioning to this online virtual world, thinking about what are our schools already doing? What's your school counseling program already doing? And how can you incorporate that? So rather than one more thing, looking at the teams you have in place, looking at the school-wide initiatives you have in place, the classroom lessons you have in place, data sources you already have, what needs assessments are already in place. Is there a way to replicate or move those online? So this is a stressful time as we're thinking about, I have to redo things I'm already doing. So again, how to work smarter rather than harder is what are you already doing? What can you build upon? So also knowing this is an evolving situation. So we need a framework that's going to be flexible, and we need data to continually monitor, such as needs assessments for our families, for our students, for our faculty and staff. What's happening? What do they need now? We're going to see different things and have different needs at different points in this COVID-19 situation. And then practices. We want to make sure we're using evidence-based practices, and that the practices, the recommendations, the resources we're passing on to our students, our families, our staff, those have been vetted. We use a lot of resources from the ASCA website in particular because we know those have been vetted, as well as a number of other organizations. And then we think about what are school counselors' roles in these 3 tiers. So for the next slide, the next few slides, we'll be talking about each tier. So to start with tier 1 here, and you'll see in the next slide, we have some examples. What do we do at the 3 tiers? So tier 1, what are strategies? Again, what are we doing for all school counselors, all students, everyone in our school? So what resources and professional development do you have? Perhaps if you are doing something on study skills or organization already in your school, how can you translate those to what does it look like in a home environment for students and families? So you're providing them with resources, again, resources that are vetted, and any professional development for your staff. Perhaps you're going over some pieces on anxiety relief, stress management, coping, et cetera, for your students, but also your staff and your faculty. So lessons via video. So this is going to look different at every school district based on your resources and recommendations for how you're interacting with your school community. But what are lessons that you're already doing perhaps as part of your comprehensive program, and how can you move those online so students can still see you and connect with you? Google form, I'll provide an example here in just a minute, but ways to solicit information, to check in, as well as collect data on what are the needs, again, of your students. I've seen one school counselor that had one for students, one for their staff, and then one for families. So each one had a separate Google check-in that they would complete, and the school counselor would look at those several times throughout the day and respond. And that fits again with needs assessments as well. Student and staff acknowledgements and communication. So what are the channels that your school district has in place that you can reach out to your different groups? And how can you acknowledge them? For example, if we're looking at, if there's some school-wide initiatives, maybe your school-wide initiative has to do with kindness. Kindness has been really big, which is great. So if there's something on kindness and you were doing that in the school before, again, this concept of working smarter, how can you incorporate things into your current program that you were doing before, and this incorporated into this virtual setting? So if your focus in your school previously was kindness, how can you do that here? Perhaps you're asking your students to take pictures of them doing things around the house that's demonstrating kindness, and you're taking those pictures and you're sharing them. So you're able to acknowledge and have some of that community building, and you're still utilizing those themes and those words you were using before. And I think that can also provide students with a sense of comfort and some routine. There's that normalcy that they were getting before. They're also still getting in this virtual. So if you have school-wide expectations, you're also using those now as well. And it's kind of that reassurance and that calm that you're providing as well. When we get back to school, and here are expectations, we're respecting self, others, and property. And this is how it looks in our virtual setting. You can see in the next slide as well. Again, how to maintain and create community climate. So if you're doing things like parades, videos, these things, again, with the kindness, if you're doing it school-wide, face-to-face, how can you just transfer that to virtual? Advisory meetings, what are groups that we're already meeting? If you have a leadership team, advisory meetings, you can still have those rather than recreate the wheel and have a new group. How can you continue to meet and again, continue to utilize these supports and these systems that were already in place? We're going to provide a couple more examples for you here, the next few slides. Examples. So here, this was really cute. I saw this on social media. One of my friends, her daughter made this list. Her daughter's in elementary, but she made this list for her at-home classroom that she ran with her dolls. So it was her and her dolls, and these are their school-wide, their home school-wide expectations. I thought it was darling. So one example, you could challenge your students. What are their home expectations for school behavior at home or just general home behaviors? And then here in the next slide, you'll see a matrix, and this is from Alabama. So they actually use their school-wide matrix, which is being safe, on time, and acting respectfully and resourcefully. How does that look in our virtual environment? So how do those look in the virtual classroom, doing independent learning on your own, online communication? So they actually define and break that down. So perhaps you and your MTSS team could have some virtual meetings and look at your matrix and put those expectations in, or have a blank matrix and have your students challenge them and their families, say, can you go ahead and fill this out for what it looks like for you? And you'll see here in the next slide, we have ways to recognize or acknowledge students. So perhaps if you have a virtual meeting, you want to acknowledge them by maybe there's a video. So if you challenge everyone in the school to post pictures or videos of them doing something kind for this kindness initiative, perhaps you're highlighting a couple and I'm acknowledging them. Look what they did a great job. When we star case this student or this student. Or perhaps when they get on if you're doing something synchronously and we're all logging on and being together, you can say, all right, this person gets to pick their own background, or this person can share a couple minutes of a song, or again, you're finding ways to do the same things you were already doing, acknowledging, connecting, really focusing on that relationship that you already have built with your students. But it's a way to creatively, right, as we're all trying to creatively utilize those same pieces from before in this virtual world that we're doing right now. And I think I have one more slide here, and this is a great example from someone in Virginia Beach City Schools. This was a student check-in, so somewhat of a needs assessment. How are you? So this is 4 images from the same check-in. So the first one is what's your name and email. The second one is how are you feeling today? And the third one is how are you keeping up with your schoolwork? And they can communicate that. And then what are your This is something that's available again, tier 1, all of our students can complete this. She has the same one available, something similar for this for family members as well as school staff. And I think that's about it for tier 1. Now I'm turning it over to Dr. Jake Olsen.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And again, a lot of us, across the country with school counseling are kind of working on tier 1 and reaching all students and getting organized, but there's certainly going to be needs for students at tier 2 level. And so we're really focusing on those students that are needing that extra support. And similar to what Emily said, we want to take an inventory of what we've done, when we were in school in person in terms of tier 2, and just think about what can we do to transfer that virtually. And so some groups may transfer over, others may not be as conducive to that, but that's the way we want to think about it. So one thing is doing small groups and individual meetings, primarily focusing on psychoeducational or skill building or checking in. Because of the the nature of confidentiality and some of the risks that might come with students not having privacy, we want to be mindful of the topics and how sensitive that information might be. But we can certainly still do skill building groups and psychoeducational type groups. There's going to be an increase in consultation and collaboration with parents and families. So if we think about running a small group in a school, we're definitely communicating and partnering with parents, but a lot of what we do is in the school building. And whereas online, obviously, the students are going to be potentially logging in from their house. And so we want to make sure that we're setting up some expectations, we're setting up some schedules with families to make sure that they are able to support and supervise their students during this time. Another thing we can do is we can set up consultation groups. So if we have students that we're getting tier 2 support prior to us all going virtually, we still want to keep track and kind of manage those students, and we want to figure out how they're doing academically, how they're doing in terms of their health and their coping while doing work at home. And so we want to be partnering and consulting with school counselors, district coordinators, and leadership teams to make sure that we have an organized plan to track students that are having those elevated needs. And then finally, many school counselors that I've talked to in different states across the nation are doing a lot more tier 2 support with teachers directly. Teachers are the ones now, most are set up to where they're doing virtual instruction, and they're having a lot of the access to many of the students. And so making sure that they have support in terms of if there are students that aren't logging in, they're not completing their work, if students may have some social or emotional type issues just with everything that's going on, that we partner with them to make sure that we're able to identify those students like we would, in person in school, and then be able to reach out and work with the parents to contact them and plug them into individual check-ins or to a group counseling situation. So here's an example of that, and this looks different depending on your school district, depending on the technology that's kind of authorized by your district. But here's an example from Hanover County Public Schools. Carla Allen has created this nice little virtual pictograph to let students know that if they have those needs in terms of social emotional, the academic or career, just like in school, that they can reach out. And the good thing about this is for parents and for students is there are very clear instructions of how to use the school technology, which in this case is Schoology, to message and get a hold of the counselor, and they can set up a time for that, that counseling interaction. So at tier 3, again, we're focusing on students with the most intensive needs. That's fewer students. And virtually, again, this really is equaling out to looking at basic needs for students and families. I think for many families, basic needs was a big issue when we first started going online and school stopped meeting in person. But as families are going on longer and longer, just helping them with those basic needs has been really critical. And then we want to continue to consult and collaborate with parents and families. I think students needing tier 3 support, they have more intensive academic and behavioral needs. And so that it's very likely that those parents that are home with their students trying to support them are going to need a lot of consultation, a lot of support, probably some strategies that we use in schools to help them manage some behaviors at home, to keep things safe and effective in terms of them still being able to learn. A lot more referrals to community agencies. A lot of support for tier 3 happens in school. And so without that, that kind of community and that family at school, they're going to need some support and how to access that, with a lot of quarantine going on. So that will be important. And then finally, as tier 3 teams, we can still meet virtually and still monitor kind of the wraparound services that our families and our students getting tier 3 support are accessing, so we can still do that. And this is just an example, more of a reminder, I think, because the technology we're using is so specific to the district. A lot of districts are adopting or have technology in place, and so rather than recreating anything new, it's just using what the district already is using or what they've adopted. But of course, making sure that we consider a couple things that we'll go over in a little bit. So some final thoughts. So we can't fill from an empty cup. So I think this is so important that that we're taking care of ourselves as school counselors, and now more than ever, practicing self-care, sometimes forced self-care, and getting into those routines and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of our students and families. Consulting and collaborating is more important now than ever. So reaching out to school counselors, to mentors, to district folks, to university faculty, and making sure that we're kind of brainstorming best practices together. And then things we need to consider virtually, especially ethics. So making sure that we're mindful of the changes in the virtual world in terms of confidentiality, in terms of privacy, in terms of sharing information, and looking certainly to ASCA for some of those ethical guidelines that they posted online. As Emily mentioned, vetting material, we are all inundated with material in terms of resources and other things. So making sure that we're vetting and making sure those resources are coming from reliable sources. Certainly ASCA is our national organization, and all the materials that we're putting out, we're definitely making sure that those are vetted materials. And then finally, following your district and state policy, and making sure that materials are supported through those venues. And then other resources too, again, going through ASCA webinars, we're certainly going to put out some resources as well.
And can I jump in with one more thought on that, Jake?
Yeah.
So in thinking about this as well, I heard something recently that as a result of this COVID-19 situation, it's really highlighting the inequities we have in society. So we're going to see that a good bit now. And a big piece of our job is also advocacy and to help ensure equity, just as we always have been. And that will look different now. So we may have some students whose families can continue to work from home and keep their job and can continue to work with their student on academics, have internet access, etc. But we also have other students who parents may be working, cannot work from home. Maybe they've lost their job or they have to go somewhere where they're in person. And that may be challenges with childcare, challenges with money and with resources. So looking at families that don't have internet, maybe aren't able to keep up with academics, etc. So having a handle on your students and looking at working with your school, your team, your leadership team, to see how are we checking in to monitor who are the students that haven't accessed resources, that haven't gotten online, that may not have internet access, that may have challenges with food. So knowing your families and seeing as a school, this isn't just you, but your school leadership team and working with your administrators to be mindful of those families that may have the most needs, and knowing we're not all coming from this, and it's not an equal playing field, and how you can continue to advocate for your students just as you have in the face-to-face setting. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you so much. So critical. And we just want to thank everybody for tuning into the webinar. Hopefully gives you a chance to kind of think and get organized in terms of moving school counseling and MTSS aligned work virtually. And this is certainly kind of a brief presentation for that. Hopefully it's helpful there.
But with superheroes, you are superheroes. So thank you for all that you are doing.
Yeah, that's such a big takeaway. And with that, our goal is to provide some support and some information. And so we want to continue to do that. And we know that MTSS and school counseling is one part of that. A lot of you are certainly facing crisis, and if not already, may face some grief issues, both now and then coming back to school whenever that is. And so we're going to provide some more webinars. Our goal is to keep those brief. And so we're gonna have those coming up next, and those will all be posted on our website, which is up top there, schoolcounselorsformtss.com. And then the final one, I think I just want to kind of hit on that a little bit, is reintegration is something that we're kind of right now we're just trying to get through setting up tier 1 and tier 2, but we're going to eventually go back. And so I think having some preparation and leadership there will be really, really important. And then finally, we have an infographic and other resources on our website. Again, School Counselors for MTSS. The one we see here is going to help you get organized with what you're doing in tier 1, 2, and 3 in terms of virtual and COVID-related type resources. So please check that out, and hopefully that's helpful for you.
And it's all free. The webinars are free. These images are free for you to download. So please use. We hope you can use them, and we hope you can share.
Yeah, and also stay in touch. If there's other things you're needing for support, information you're wanting. Again, our goal is to be a support and provide information. So we have our Twitter and Facebook down below, School Counselors for MTSS. You can also text at this number, 202-410-4202. And if you text MTSS to that, that will help you get us your email, and we can get you information that way. So again, we just want to thank everybody for accessing the webinar. And we're looking forward to you coming to the next one as well.
Thank you so much. Take care, and thank you for all the good work you're doing. Keep it up. Keep your cup filled, and stay in touch. Take care. Bye.